Hare Krishna. So we are continuing to read on Srimad Bhagavatam, second canto. So on chapter entitled "Hard in the Heart," the Lord in the Heart, and we are continuing to read from text 7. So until yesterday, His Grace Harivilas Prabhu was reading up to text 6. So we are going to continue to read in the second canto, second chapter, text 7 and onwards. And so far, the context is so far in the first canto, we all know why Bhagavatam is spoken. So Bhagavatam was spoken by Sukadeva Goswami to Parikshit Maharaj. And Parikshit Maharaj is the great grandson of Arjuna. He is the son of Abhimanyu. He is son of Abhimanyu and Uttara. And he was the emperor of the world after Yudhishthira Maharaj left the planet. So he was actually the emperor of the whole world. And then one time he was actually going in the forest and he was very thirsty and hungry. And then he went to the ashram of Samik Rishi. And Samik Rishi, he was under meditation. He was doing meditation. He was in samadhi. So he doesn't recognize Parikshit Maharaj coming into the ashram. And but Parikshit is very thirsty and hungry, and he was agitated by this thirst and hunger. So if he sees that the sage does not receive him, does not offer water for him, he gets agitated, and then he takes a snake and throws on the neck of Samik Rishi and leaves. So this information reaches Samik Rishi's son, Shringi. Shringi is a very small boy, immature boy. By hearing this, he gets upset that his father is insulted, and immediately he says, "Let me show my Brahmanical power." And then immediately he curses Parikshit Maharaj to die in 7 days. But this curse was inappropriate at all. This is not appropriate at all by the Shringi. Because Parikshit Maharaj at the time, he was like thirst and hunger, he was like pushed by his body to get angry and do this. And then whatever he did, it was a small offense. It was a dead snake. And Samik Rishi was not offended at all by this whole event. Whereas Shringi, out of his inexperience, he make this curse. Because Parikshit Maharaj is a great devotee of the Lord, when he is cursed, even though he has the capability to counter curse, Shringi, he doesn't do that. He accepts this as the will of the Lord. This as the will of the Lord that is supposed to happen because I made a mistake by insulting Samik Rishi. So I deserve this. He took it in that mood. He did not get offended. That is the behavior of a devotee. Devotees, when somebody insults them personally, they don't feel offended at all. They actually take it that as the will of the Lord. But whereas when the Lord or other devotees get offended, if somebody offends the Lord or other devotees, actually they take appropriate action. In this case, Shringi cursed Parikshit, and Parikshit takes that as the will of the Lord. Immediately he renounces the kingdom, then goes and sits in the bank of river Ganges, and then all the great sages in the universe, they all assemble there to guide Parikshit because he is the emperor of the whole world. At that time, so Shukadeva Goswami, the son of Vyasadeva, he comes to the assembly, and then all the sages, they request Shukadeva Goswami to instruct Parikshit Maharaj. And then Shukadeva Goswami is given the Vyasasan, and then Parikshit surrenders to Shukadeva Goswami, and all the sages in the universe, they all assemble there to listen from Shukadeva Goswami. And what Shukadeva Goswami is going to speak? He is going to speak Srimad Bhagavatam, which he learned from his father, Vyasadeva. And Vyasa already taught Srimad Bhagavatam to Shukadeva Goswami. And he was actually, the whole purpose of Shukadeva Goswami coming into this world is to speak Srimad Bhagavatam. So that's why Vyasadeva actually prays to the Supreme Lord and then ask him for a son who will be qualified to speak on Srimad Bhagavatam. Because he knows that Srimad Bhagavatam has to be recited. Because in the age of Kali, after compiling all the scriptures, Srimad Bhagavatam needs to be compiled, because that's the summum bonum or conclusion of all Vedic literature. Because Vedas contains so much information. Veda means knowledge. So Vedas contains so much divisions of knowledge. It contains Samhitas, Brahmanas, Aranyakas, Upanishads, and then it has the 4 divisions of Vedas: Rig Veda, Yajurveda, Samaveda, and Atharva Veda. And then Vedavyas compiled all this Vedic literature for the welfare of humankind. He knew that in Kali Yuga, people will be having short memory and short lifespan. For the welfare of the humankind, Vedavyas compiled the whole Vedas in the written form. He divided, Vedas were only one before. He divided the Vedas into 4 divisions and gave it to 4 of his disciples to compile. And then after that, personally he himself compiled the Puranas and Idihasas. Puranas means history. Purana means the ancient history. Idihasa means what had happened in the past. That's what Idihasa means. He compiled this personally. After compiling all this, he also compiled something called Vedanta Sutra. Vedanta Sutra means, Veda means knowledge, Anta means conclusion. Sutra means aphorism or formula. So Vedavyas, after compiling all these literatures, the Samhitas, Brahmanas, Aranyakas, Upanishads, and then compiling the Puranas and Idihasas, he compiled also the Vedanta Sutra. Vedanta Sutra has around 560 formulas, aphorisms, which contains the entire Vedic knowledge. So each one of the sutra is very small. Like for example, the first sutra says, Atato Brahma Jignasa. Now therefore inquire into Brahman. So it's like that, small aphorisms. Even though they are small aphorisms, it contains the entire Vedic knowledge. This 560 aphorisms contains the entire Vedic knowledge. How? Like if you look at a banyan tree is so huge. But if you look at a banyan tree seed, it is like a small mustard seed. The small mustard seed size banyan tree seed contains the potency for the entire banyan tree. If somebody takes this banyan tree seed, and then plants it and nurtures it, he will get entire banyan tree. Similarly, this Vedanta Sutra, even though they are small aphorisms, 560 aphorisms, even though they are small, it contains the entire Vedic knowledge. When somebody takes this sutras, studies under a bona fide spiritual master, properly follows the process of devotional service under the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master, he can get the whole knowledge of the Vedas, conclusion of all the Vedas. So he compiled this. After doing all this work, still Narada Muni felt dissatisfied with his work. When you do some good work, you will feel satisfaction in your heart. For welfare of the humankind, after compiling all the Vedas, still he was not satisfied with the work done by himself. So he was like thinking about it. He is contemplating why this dissatisfaction. At that time, his spiritual master, Narada Muni, comes to the ashram of Vedavyas. And then he immediately offers the seat to Narada Muni, and then offers respect to him. And then he inquires, "Oh, my dear spiritual master, for the welfare of the humankind, I had compiled all the Vedas into written form, and then divided Vedas into different divisions. The proper Vedas, Samhitas, Puranas, Idihasas, Vedanta Sutra, all of them I had done. But still I am not satisfied with my work. What is the cause for my dissatisfaction in the heart?" So Narada Muni immediately replies that, "Oh, my dear disciple, Vedavyas, yes, you have done a wonderful work compiling the Vedic literature for the welfare of the humankind. But unfortunately, you have not directly described the goal of the human life, the goal of life. You have taken you had explained the indirect path of dharma, artha, kama, moksha. You are given the indirect path, not the direct path. People are not going to take up this indirect path seriously. Anyway, because the people are, in general, they are interested towards sense gratification. Dharma and Artha and Kama Moksha. Probably they will not even come up to the Moksha level. They will come up to only Artha and Kama. You are given this indirect path, but you have not described the goal itself directly enough. That is the root cause for your dissatisfaction in the heart. After hearing this, Vedavyas final 4 slokas of Srimad Bhagavatam, the Chaturshlam, and he further meditates on the Supreme Lord, and then he compiles the entire Srimad Bhagavatam. When he comes a natural commentary unto the Vedanta Sutra, so that one understand by studying Srimad Bhagavatam. After doing this work, he prays at the time to the Supreme Lord to get a son who can be qualified to recite this. That's how he gets Sukadeva Goswami, and he trained Sukadeva Goswami in Srimad Bhagavatam. That Sukadeva Goswami is the one who comes to this assembly where Parikshit Maharaj is sitting to hear instructions from the sages. On the request of all the sages, Sukadeva Goswami starts instructing Parikshit Maharaj. And Parikshit Maharaj makes proper inquiry. He asks the question to Sukadeva Goswami, what are the duties of a person who is about to leave his body? That is how the inquiry starts. So this is how Bhagavatam was recited. In this assembly, Suta Goswami, also one of the sages who listens to Srimad Bhagavatam from Sukadeva Goswami. And then that Suta Goswami, later, he goes to the Naimisharanya forest, where all the sages, after the Kali Yuga had begun for the welfare of the humankind, the sages, all the great sages assembled in Naimisharanya forest, they conduct a 1,000-year yajna. To that assembly, Suta Goswami comes, and then they offer, all the sages were the head, the leader of the whole sages was like Shaunaka, and then they request Suta Goswami to sit down and then explain literatures properly under the guidance of his father, Romaharshana. So they offer him the Vyasasana. They ask him to explain what is the ultimate good for all beings. And then Krishna take birth in the house of Nanda Maharaj and Yashoda Mai. And then what are the pastimes of the Lord in connection to creation of this material universe? And then and what are his activities, the Leela avatars, description of the Leela avatar. And then after Supreme Lord Shri Krishna left the planet, where have Dharma have taken shelter? Like that they ask the 6 questions. Suta Goswami answers these 6 questions, and then by narrating Srimad Bhagavatam, which was given by Sukadeva Goswami to Parikshit Maharaj. So this is the context. So far, as I described, we had heard all this in the first canto. We had saw that the inquiry of Vyasadeva, the inquiry of all the sages to Suta Goswami, and then Vedavyas compiling Srimad Bhagavatam, appearance of Sukadeva Goswami, and then also Bhishma's disappearance, and then Queen Kunti's prayers, and then Pandavas, all of Dhritarashtra actually quitting his home, and Pandavas leaving the kingdom and attaining the supreme abode, and then Lord Shri Krishna leaving the planet. All this covered in first canto. In the second canto, in the first chapter, was entitled The First Step in God Realization. In that actually, to the inquiry of Parikshit Maharaj, Sukadeva Goswami answers. So continuing in that line, so the second chapter entitled Lord in the Heart, that's what we have been reading for past few days. His Grace Harivilas Prabhu have been reading. And we are reading actually, continuing to read from the text number 7. Before reading text 7, I will read text 6 so that we continue. We will have continuity. So text 6. Thus being fixed, one must render service unto the super soul situated in one's own heart by his omnipotency. Because he is the almighty personality of Godhead, eternal and unlimited, he is the ultimate goal of life, and by worshipping him one can end the cause of conditioned state of existence. Here actually Sukadeva Goswami is telling, for the conditioned living entity, the only way to get out of this material world is to surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead and render transcendental loving service unto Him. That is the only way to get relief from the cycle of birth and death for the conditioned living entity. That's the verse. And then we'll continue to read text 7. Who else but the gross materialists will neglect such transcendental thought and take to the non-permanent names only, seeing the mass of people fall in the river of suffering as the consequence of accruing the result of their own work. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. In the Vedas, it is said that the persons who are attached to demigods to the exclusion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead are like the animals who follow the headsman even though they are taken to the slaughterhouse. Materialists like animals also do not know how they are being misdirected by neglecting the transcendental thought of the Supreme Person. No one can remain vacant of thought. It is said that an idle brain is a devil's workshop, because a person who cannot think in the right way must think of something which may bring about disaster. The materialists are always worshipping some minor demigods, although this is condemned in Srimad Bhagavad Gita, 7th chapter, 20th verse. Here actually Prabhupada is telling that in the Vedas it is said that the person who are attached to demigods to the exclusion of Supreme Personality of Godhead are like animals who follow the herdsman even though they are taken to the slaughterhouse. Actually it's a very strong statement. People who worship the different devatas without understanding what is the goal of life, they are like animals being directed by a herdsman towards the slaughterhouse. Why is it said like that here? Because these people, generally, why do they go and worship different devatas? Because they want some material benefits. And they do not know that the material benefits offered by the devatas are only temporary. Because they themselves are temporary. The devatas themselves, they are limited. They also live for a particular time of particular lifespan, and then they have to leave the body as well. The devatas are nothing but the living entities like us, but they are given an elevated post. If you look at it in this country, so we are all citizens. And then if you look at the city of Samamish, there are quite a few government employees. City of Samamish government employees are there. They are also normal living entities, normal citizens of this city. But they have been appointed to discharge the government's duty on behalf of the head of the city. The city is discharging the duty of the county, and county is discharging the duty of the state, and the state is discharging the duty of the country, and the country is headed by the president. Ultimately, everybody is working for the president. Under the direction of the president, everybody is working. Similarly, the devatas are also living entities like us, but they are more elevated, and they have been given a responsible post in the universal government, in the universal affairs, to conduct the universal affair. Among all these entities, Lord Brahma is the chief. He is the topmost living being in this particular universe. But he also has a limited lifespan. He also lives 100 years of his time. That is equivalent to 311 trillion years for human beings. So, given that everybody is temporary, they cannot offer something eternal. When Hiranyakashipu asked for a boon from Brahma, he wanted immortality. And Lord Brahma said, Hiranyakashipu, I cannot give you that, because I myself not immortal. I have limited time span. How can I offer which I don't have? He could not offer immortality to Hiranyakashipu, because he himself is limited. So, the devatas, they are all limited. So, hence they can offer only temporary boons, which will run out like a bank balance. After some time, it will end. So when that bank balance ends, that living entity has to face Janma Mrityu Jara Vyadi. Even the Devatas, when their pious credit gets over, they will be kicked out of the higher planets and they have to fall down into the lower planetary system to accumulate more karmas. So here it is mentioned the materialists are just like animals, because animal doesn't know, it can't discriminate. If somebody is dragging a bunch of animal towards a slaughterhouse, the animals don't know that they are going to be slaughtered. Even what to speak of dragging, even if that an animal is tied in a rope on a pole and then somebody is giving some leaves for the animals to eat, in front of that goat, there could be another goat the butcher might be cutting. By looking at that, the animal doesn't know that it is next in line. It happily eats the leaves offered. It doesn't know that it is next in the line. Whereas a human being is supposed to have higher discriminating power. In the same situation, if you put a human being, immediately, do you think a human being will keep eating the leaves or keep eating the food offered to him? If somebody is slaughtering somebody else before him? No. He will have the capability to see that he is next in line. He is discriminating ability. So that is what it is mentioned here. People who are attached to demigod worship without understanding the goal of life, without surrendering to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they are just like this ignorant animals, because they doesn't know that they will be slaughtered by the kala, in the form of death. All the things they accumulated will be taken out. So here further Prabhupada says, idle mind is the devil's workshop and no one can remain vacant of thought. Everybody has to work. So can anybody stop working? Some people generally say that the purpose of life is to quit everything, renounce everything, and then go to the forest and then simply just meditate. Even during the process of meditation, even if you are able to control the breath, still you have to breathe. The fact that somebody is breathing, he actually is affecting other living entities. There are so many bacteria are in the air. So many living entities are there in the air as well. Just the fact of the act that we are breathing, we actually hinder other living entities. So one can never be idle, because the nature of the spirit soul is to be always active. So this one can never be idle. So no one can remain vacant of thought. It is said that an idle brain is a devil's workshop, because a person who cannot think in the right way must think of something which may bring about disaster. So if you don't surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, if you are not engaged in devotional service, by this principle we can understand that they are engaged in sinful activity. If you are not engaged in service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, what are you engaged in? You are engaged in karmic activity, which is nothing but eventually is going to bring disaster in the form of death. So that is why the worship of demigods is condemned in Srimad Bhagavad Gita. Krishna tells in Bhagavad Gita 7th chapter 20th verse that only people with less intelligence, they approach the devatas, because they don't know that the boons offered by the devatas are limited. And then also even that limited boon is given by who? Where does the demigods give this boon? They derive the power from, the authority from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Lord Krishna only gives the capability for the devatas to give these boons to their worshippers. So a person who doesn't have proper knowledge, he thinks that that particular devata is all in all. So hence they simply surrender to that person and simply worship, without understanding that there is one Supreme Personality of Godhead, that is Lord Shri Krishna, and he is the ultimate summum bonum of everything. As long as a person is illusioned by material gains, he petitions the respective demigods to draw some particular benefit, which is after all illusory and non-permanent. The enlightened transcendentalist is not captivated by such illusory things. Therefore, he is always absorbed in the transcendental thought of the Supreme in different stages of realization, namely Brahman, Paramatma and Bhagavan. In the previous verse, it is suggested that one should think of the super soul, which is one step higher than impersonal thought of Brahman. And as it was suggested in the case of contemplating the Virat Rupa of the personality of Godhead. Here it is mentioned that there are three levels of, for a transcendentalist who wanted to rise above the material activity, karma and jnana, right? One wanted to come to the level of devotional service. Even before devotional service, one wanted to transcend the three modes of material nature. One wants to transcend above these three modes of material activities. There are three levels in understanding God. It is mentioned here that in the first canto, there is a sloka which mentions a transcendentalist who is aspiring to understand this absolute truth. He can realize that absolute truth in three levels. The first level of realizing the absolute truth is Brahman. Seeing that absolute truth is all pervading, absolute truth is the source of everything, everything emanates from that absolute truth, and absolute truth is the one sustains all activities of this world, both material energy and the living entities. All of them are emanating from Brahman. That is the first level of understanding God realization. That is Brahman realization. The second level of understanding God is to see that same God, that Brahman, is also available in every living entity as Paramatma. God is situated in everyone's heart as Paramatma. In general, people think that Paramatma is the one which is in everyone's heart, and they mistake that to be themselves. Actually Krishna tells in Bhagavad Gita that in every living entity, every body, there is a living entity, the Jiva. That is nothing but part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. Apart from this living entity, Jivatma, there is another living entity. That is called Paramatma. What is there? Upadrashta Anumantacha, Bharta Bhokta Mageshwara, Paramatmeti Chapyukto, Degeshmin Purusha Para. It is mentioned in the 15th chapter, right? 15th chapter, 13th chapter. 13? 13, 20. Yeah. 1323. Upadrashta Anamantacha, Bharta Bhokta Mageshwara, Paramatmeti Chapyukto, Degeshmin Purushapara. Yet in this body there is another, a transcendental enjoyer, who is the Lord, the Supreme Proprietor, who exists as the overseer and permitter, and who is known as the Super Soul. Here very clearly Krishna tells what is Super Soul. Super Soul is another living entity. He is the apart from the soul, the Atma, Jivatma, there is another Atma, which is all pervading, which is situated in everyone's heart. I am situated only in my body. I am not situated in your body. I can't understand what is happening in your body. I can understand only what happens in my body. Hence, I am Jivatma. Whereas Paramatma, he is situated in everyone's body, but he can simultaneously know what happens in everyone's body. That is why he is called Paramatma or Super Soul. So Krishna is giving that definition. In this body, that yet there is another soul. That person is the one who oversees all activities of this world and permits all the activities. And he is the Lord. He is the Supreme Proprietor. He is the transcendental enjoyer who is the Lord, the Supreme Proprietor, who exists as overseer and permitter. Upadrashta Anumantacha. Upadrashta means overseeing. Anumanta means permitting. Bharta Bhokta Mageshwara. He is the transcendental enjoyer and he is the Lord. He is called the Super Soul. So that understanding that Super Soul is the second level of understanding God. A yogi, a jnani, sees in the beginning that everything exists because of Brahman. When a jnani advances from this jnana platform, he comes to the yogi platform. A yogi sits down and meditates on the Super Soul in the heart. So if that yogi is properly guided by a spiritual master, that yogi eventually graduates from this yogi platform into, from yogi, he becomes a bhakta. If he doesn't, so he will actually, he might attain the impersonal Brahman. But if he is properly guided, he will develop loving service unto the Paramatma who is in his heart. That is nothing but Bhagavan. That is the third level of understanding God realization. That's what Prabhupada is quoting here. That the different stages of realization is namely Brahman, Paramatma and Bhagavan. In the previous verse also it is suggested that one should think of the super soul, which is one step higher than the impersonal thought of Brahman, as it was suggested in the contemplating the Virat Rupa of the personality of Godhead. Intelligent persons who can properly may look into the general conditions of the living entities who are wandering in the cycle of the 8.4 million species of life, as well as in different classes of human beings. It is said that there is an everlasting belt of water called the river Vaitarani at the entrance of the Plutonic planet of Yamaraja, who punishes sinners in different manners. Thus, being subjected to such sufferings, a sinner is awarded a particular species of life according to his deeds in the past. Such living entities are punished by Yamaraja, are seen in different varieties of conditioned life. Some of them are in heaven and some of them are in hell. Some of them are brahmanas and some of them are misers. No one is happy in the material world, and all of them are either class A, B or C prisoners suffering because of their own deeds. The Lord is impartial to all circumstances of the sufferings of the living entities. But to one who takes shelter of his lotus feet, the Lord gives proper protection, and he takes such a living entity back home, back to himself. Here, again Prabhupada is further defining that the living entity trying to enjoy on its own goes through different species of life. There are totally 8.4 million species of life. Jalaja Navalakshani, Tavara Lakshya Vimshadi. There are 9 million aquatics, and then there are 20 lakhs plants, and then 11 lakhs insects, Kirmayo Rudrani, and then the beasts are 30, right? Birds, no, birds are not 30 lakhs. 10 lakhs. 10 lakhs birds and 30 lakhs beasts, and then 4 lakhs human beings. Totally there are 84 lakh species. So a living entity, according to its desire, it gets different body. Before getting into a particular body, if somebody has certain sinful desires, so they go to the hellish planet, where the Yamaraj punishes that living entity and trains that living entity to get a particular type of body. Then after that, that particular living entity is given a suitable body to fulfill that type of desires. If somebody wants to eat all the time some garbage, so if a human being, he likes to eat all the time some garbage, so that person first is taken to the hellish planets, where that punishment is given to the soul, so that it can get trained to such a kind of situation, and then later that person might given a hog's body. Or for example, a particular person would like to stand naked all the time, expose themselves all the time. So that person will be taken to the hellish planets. That person will be made to embrace like a molten statue of like hot iron statue made up of fiery hot iron statue. That person will be made to embrace, so that the soul gets used to that kind of condition, and then later that person might be given a tree's body, because the tree has to stand in sun, hot weather, right? It doesn't have any protection at all. The tree has to stand for like thousands of years in cold and hot weather. So for that is a type of suffering. The soul needs to be first punished to get to train in that kind of condition. then that particular soul will be given a particular type of body to go through that different desires. So Yamaraj is the one who awards this type of punishment and different types of body. And then here, even somebody might be living in a higher planetary system, in Devaloka, like a Indra, or like Chandra, or Vayu, Varuna, or some other Devadas, or Apsaras, Gandharvas. Somebody might be enjoying very opulently in a higher planetary system. But that person is also nothing but a prisoner in this material world. Everybody in this material world is nothing but a prisoner. You might ask the question, why everybody is in prison? I thought, I don't see any walls, I don't see anything which is bounding us. We thought we are free here in this material world. No. This material world is nothing but a prison without any walls. This material world itself is designed for the rebellious living entity which revolted against the Supreme Personality of Godhead, given an opportunity to correct itself. This material world, Prabhupada tells, this material world is nothing but an opportunity given to the rebellious living entity to correct itself. You might ask the question, then what is the real place? If this is prison, if the material world is prison, what is the real place? The real place is our original home, spiritual world. The living entity, the spirit soul, does not belong to material world, it belongs to spiritual world. Originally we have been with association of Krishna, we are serving the Lord with love and devotion, happily, in a particular mood, with a particular relationship. But at some point of time, the living entity revolted against the Lord. It misused its free will. Because in spiritual world, the service to the Lord is out of love. Love means it has to be based on free will. Free will to love or not to love the Supreme Personality of Godhead. At some point of time, this living entity, certain living entities misused that free will to not to follow the instructions of the Lord, not to serve Him. It wanted to enjoy independently. Hence, those living entities have been sent to the material universe, material world, so that it can try to enjoy independent of the Lord, which it cannot do. Eventually it will get frustrated. And then the other option is to reform itself. After going through various species of life, after trying to enjoy through different species of life, it will understand that I can never be happy on my own without the protection of the Lord, without surrendering, without serving the Lord. The living entity realizes that it can never be happy on its own. When it realizes, it surrenders towards the Supreme Personality of Godhead and then develops, revives its lost relationship by rendering devotional service under the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master. That is what Prabhupada is telling here. Someone may be a Brahmana or someone may be a miser. Someone may be a Brahmana, someone might be a Kripana. Brahmana means one who is broad-minded. Kripana means one who is narrow-minded. So both of them are nothing but prisoner in this house. But a Brahmana who has capacity to understand that he is suffering, and then he will use the human form of life and surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead and follows the spiritual master and the scriptures, and then he will get liberated himself. That is what a Brahmana is. Brahmana means one who constantly inquires into Brahman. That's what Brahmana means. Whereas Kripana means one, even though that somebody is given this, the Lord had given this human body, even though human body has the capability to discriminate between right and wrong, good and bad, happiness and suffering, he doesn't use that facility. For example, if I have $1 million, and then if I take that $1 million, behind my house I dig a hole, and then I hide all the $1 million, and then I don't wear proper clothes, I dress like a beggar, torn clothes, I eat like a beggar by begging in the street. Not only that, I make my whole family also live like beggar and make them live like beggar. What will you call me? You will call me as the colloquial term for it is kanjus, right? Miser. Because I have been given facility But without using that facility for what it is intended for, I am not using that facility, given whatever the facility is given. If some facility is given to me, if I am not using that facility properly, I will be called as miser. The proper term for, the Sanskrit term for miser is kripana. Kripana means narrow-minded person. He doesn't know the proper, he doesn't know how to use the facilities properly. For a human being, because human body is capable of discriminating between right and wrong, good and bad. Only human beings can discriminate. Animals, other species, other 8 million type of species, they cannot discriminate between right and wrong. They simply go through eating, mating, sleeping, defending. They are simply propelled by the propensities of eating, mating, sleeping, defending. All their reasoning, all their intelligence, all their activities are to fulfill only eat, mate, sleep and defend. Whereas human beings can rise above this struggle for eat, mate, sleep and defend. They can actually inquire. When we suffer, we can understand that we are suffering. Whereas when an animal suffers, they don't understand that they are suffering. They are simply going through the suffering. Only human being has the capability to discriminate between happiness and suffering, good and bad, right and wrong. When we don't use that facility, we are nothing but a kripana, a two-legged animal. That's what the scripture says. So all this, right? All this, after concluding all these things, as a person has to understand that I am suffering because I am separated from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And when that person surrenders unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead and starts rendering devotional service to revive the lost relationship, that person, right? That person, the Lord gives protection. For that such a surrendered devotee, the Lord gives protection and he takes him back to home, back to Godhead. So we'll continue to read the next verse, text 8. Others conceive of the personality of Godhead residing within the body in the region of the heart and measuring only 8 inches with 4 hands, carrying a lotus, a wheel of a chariot, a conch shell and a club respectively. Here in this verse, that super soul, right? So that the recommendation given is that super soul needs to be, one has to surrender to the super soul and render into devotional service. A person who's devoid of proper knowledge, only the materialist will not do that work. Whereas a transcendentalist, when he surrenders to the super soul and worships him, he will realize that super soul in his heart. The description of the super soul is mentioned here. Actually, he is residing in the region of the heart and he is like 8 inches, only 8 inches long. Actually, the Lord, Paramatma, the super soul in our heart, he has a 4-handed form, and then actually he is considered to be 8 inch long. He is not a material form, he is a transcendental form. A yogi who goes through the Ashtanga yoga process, Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Dharana, Pratyahara, and Dhyana and Samadhi. When he goes through these 8 stages of yoga, when he comes to the Samadhi state, when he comes to the final level of yoga process, that is Samadhi. Samadhi means uninterrupted meditation on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He can see the Lord in the heart, in the Paramatma form, in the 4-handed form, who holds this 4 different paraphernalia in his hand. What are the 4 different paraphernalia? Shankha, Chakra, Gada, Padma. Right? Lotus, a wheel of a chariot, chakra, and then a conch shell and a club. So a person who meditates on the super soul, who attains the final stage in meditation, he can have darshan of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the heart. Purport. The all-pervading personality of the Godhead resides as Paramatma in the heart of each and every living entity. The measurement of the localized personality of Godhead is estimated to expand from the ring finger to the end of the thumb, more or less 8 inches. The form of the Lord, described in this verse with the distribution of different symbols, beginning from the lower right hand up and down to the lower left hand with lotus, a wheel of chariot, a conch shell, club respectively is called Janardana. This particular form of the Lord, who exists in all living entities' heart as super soul, is called Janardana. The Lord in the spiritual world, in the Vaikuntha planets, in the 400 form, depending on the location of the conch, location of the lotus, location of the gada, he is called different names. Here it is mentioned, right, beginning from the lower right hand, from this hand up, lower, upper left and upper lower left, in that order, right, with lotus. In the lower left hand, lotus, and then lower right hand, the wheel, the chakra, and then upper left hand, the conch shell, and then lower left hand, the club. When he holds in this particular form, these 4 different things in this 4 location, this particular form is called Janardana. So this Janardana is the one who exists in all living entities' heart as super soul. Is called Janardana, or the plenary portion of the Lord who controls the general mass. Why he is called Janardana? He is the one who controls all living entities, all Janas. That's why he is called Janardana. There are many other forms of the Lord with varied situations of the symbols of the lotus, conch shell, etc. And they are differently known as Purushottama, Achyuta, Narasingha, Trivikrama, Rishikesha, Keshava, Madhava, Aniruddha, Pradyumna, Sankarshana, Sridhara, Vasudeva, Damodara, Janardana, Narayana, Hari, Padmanabha, Vamana, Madhusudana, Govinda, Krishna, Vishnumurti, Adokshaja and Upendra. These 24 forms of the localized personality of Godhead are worshipped in different parts of the planetary system, and in each system there is an incarnation of the Lord having different Vaikuntha planet in the spiritual sky, which is called Parovyama. There are many other hundreds and scores of different forms of the Lord, and each and every one of them has a particular planet in the spiritual sky, of which this material sky is only a fragmental offshoot. The Lord exists as Purusha, or the male enjoyer, although there is no comparing him to any male form in the material world. But all such forms are Advaita, non-different from one another, and each of them is eternally young. The young Lord with 4 hands is nicely decorated as described below. Here Prabhupada further explains this 24 different types of Narayana forms, depending on the location of the conch shell, the position of the conch shell, the lotus flower, the chakra weapon and the gada weapon. He is called with different names. In the different permutation combination, these 4 things in different permutation combination, you get 24 combinations, 24 varieties, 24 sequences. So these 24 sequences are given 24 different names. And these forms of the Lord are the one who exist in the spiritual world, in the Vaikuntha planets. Each one of the Lord in this particular form exists in a particular spiritual Vaikuntha planet, and the living entity has a loving relationship with a particular form of the Lord. They worship him. Not only these 24, there are innumerable number of Vaikuntha planets exist, Prabhupada explains. And the Lord exists in each one, every one of them in different forms. All this spiritual sky is called Parovyama. Parovyama means beyond our conception, beyond our material existence, Parovyama. So that spiritual sky is the one where the Lord exists, and that is the home of the living entity. The living entity, the spirit souls, originally belong to Vaikuntha planets. They used to live with the Lord in a particular loving relationship. So we have left that particular relationship, and then we are into this material world. That's what we are struggling here. The way to get back to the spiritual world is by surrendering to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, understanding that I am spirit soul, I am eternal servitor of the Supreme Lord, and then start rendering devotional service unto him in the mood of surrender. When somebody does that lost relationship, that forgotten relationship can be revived. When somebody does that surrendering to the Lord protects that living entity from the dangers of this world, and then takes him back to Godhead. So the next verse gives the description of that 400 form of the Lord. His mouth expresses his happiness, his eyes spread like the petal of a lotus, and his garments, yellowish like a saffron of a kadamba flower, are bedecked with valuable jewels. His ornaments are made of gold, set with jewels, and he wears a glowing headdress and earrings. Here the description of the Lord who is in the heart as Paramatma is given. He has a beautiful helmet and he has beautiful jewelry. All this jewelry are in golden color, bedecked with different jewels. And then his eyes are like lotus flower, petals of a lotus. And then his mouth expresses happiness. He is always with a nice smile, beautiful smile. The Lord is always with a beautiful smile. In the next verse, the description continues. His lotus feet are placed over the whorls of a lotus like hearts of great mystics. On his chest is the Kaustuba jewel, engraved with a beautiful calf, and there are other jewels on his shoulders. His complete torso is garlanded with fresh flowers. Prabhupada writes in purport, the ornaments, the flowers, clothing, and all other decorations on the transcendental body of the personality of Godhead are identical with the body of the Lord. None of them are made of material ingredients. Otherwise, there would be no chance of their decorating the body of the Lord. As such, in the Parovyoma, spiritual varieties are also distinguished from material variegatedness. Here Prabhupada explains, the paraphernalia of the Lord are all non-different than the Lord. The Lord is spirit. He is the supreme spirit. The Lord is spirit. He is not made up of material elements. His body and his form is not made up of material elements like us. Our body is made up of these 5 gross elements consisting of blood, urine, pus, stool, right? Whereas the Lord's body is not material. It's transcendental. It's made up of Sat, Chit, Ananda. It is transcendental. So that Lord, when he is decorated with various ornaments and flowers and all these clothings, they are all not made up of matter either. They are also transcendental. The paraphernalia of the Lord are non-different than the Lord himself. There is no difference in spiritual world. There is no difference between the Lord and the Lord's paraphernalia and his abode. All of them are his energy. In the purified consciousness, a living entity sees everything as spiritual energy of the Lord. In every aspect, he sees the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As when he sees something, when a self-realized soul sees this microphone, he will not see this microphone separate from the Lord. He will see that this is in connection to the Lord. He sees that this is the energy of the Lord, and hence it needs to be used in the service of the Lord. So he does not actually see everything as different from the Lord. He sees everything as in connection with the Lord. Everything needs to be used for service of the Lord. And also it's mentioned here, in the spiritual world, the variegatedness is different from the material variegatedness. In the material world, we see variegatedness. We see so many different types of things. So many types of people, so many types of food, so many types of clothes, so many types of cars, so many types of things we see in this material world. Similarly, in the spiritual world also variegatedness exists. But they should not be mistaken to be the material variegatedness. Because the spiritual variegatedness is made up of Sat, Chit, Ananda. They are eternal. They are all blissful. They are all cognizant. In spiritual world, even a microphone has consciousness. Whereas in material world, it does not. Material world is nothing but perverted reflection of the spiritual world. Material world is nothing but perverted reflection of the spiritual world. In spiritual world, everything is Sat, Chit, Ananda. In this material world, other than the living entities, everything is Asat, Achit and Nirananda. Everything is temporary. Matter is always changing. And everything is dead, inert. They are not conscious. And everything is doesn't have bliss, happiness.
When I speak something, if I speak some beautiful songs, Prabhu can feel probably happy with the mood in which I am singing. But this microphone, even though I am using this microphone to sing, the microphone does not experience any happiness, any bliss. You see what I am saying? Only spiritual things can be Sat Chit Ananda. Material things cannot be. Material thing is nothing but perverted reflection of that spiritual thing. Asat Achit Nirananda. So the variegatedness in this material world actually is nothing but reflection of the spiritual world. And whatever we see in this world, all the things we see in this world, the true form exists in the spiritual world. People generally they say that this material world is Maya, it's illusion. And people say that we mistake the rope to be a snake. People mistake this material world to be real, they say. If somebody has a misconception of a rope to be a snake, that means the concept of snake has to exist somewhere. If I am mistaking a rope to be a snake, when will I mistake something to be something else? If I am mistaking the rope to be a snake, I should have knowledge about snake first of all. Then only I can mistake the rope to be a snake. If I had never seen the snake, how can I mistake a rope to be a snake? I can't. Similarly, the variegatedness in this world comes from the real thing. Yes, this material world is nothing but an illusion, shadow of the real thing. The real thing is spiritual world. So to take this material world as permanent is the illusion. This material world is not like false. This material world is true. But taking this to be permanent is the illusion. That is false. For example, if I am having a dream, right? In the dream, a tiger is chasing me. And I am going through emotions. I am going through trauma. The tiger is chasing me, I am running. I am running like that. Is this real or illusion? Huh? But the experience I am going through is real. After I wake up, right? My body is perspiring, I am scared, I woke up. Right? Before I wake up, the experience I am going through of the tiger chasing me is real. The dream is real. To take that dream to be the experience of I going through the dream, but to take that is permanent. But once I wake up, it's gone. Right? If I think that this dream is the real thing and tiger is always chasing me, that is illusion. From the dream, he comes to reality. Similarly, the living entity is underment. Ishvaro aham, aham bhogi. Everything I see is for my enjoyment and everything is for my control. I am the controller of everything. And to take that this material world is the real thing, that is illusion. If the living entity wakes up from its illusion, it can understand that I am not this body, I am spirit soul, I belong to the spiritual world, and my Lord, the Supreme Lord is my master, and my purpose of my life is to serve that supreme whole. The purpose of the part is to serve the whole. The purpose of the leg is to serve the body. Similarly, the purpose of the living entity, Jivatma, is to render transcendental loving service unto the Supreme Lord. So that's what Prabhupada is mentioning, this variegatedness in this greatness. Because in this material world, whatever variegatedness we are seeing, it is made up of Asat, Achit, Nirananda. Hence, when we associated with variegatedness in this material world, we experience Nirananda, suffering. Whereas when we associated with variegatedness in the spiritual world, we experience Ananda, bliss. We are continuing to read 11th verse. He is well decorated with an ornamental wreath about his waist and rings studded with valuable jewels on his fingers. His leglets and his bangles and his oiled hair curling with a bluish tint and his beautiful smiling face are all very pleasing. Here the description, further description of the Lord is given here. His form, right? His whole form, all his paraphernalia, everything is very pleasing. By looking at Radha Neelamadhava, right? what feeling we get? We get a pleasing feeling. Right? We get a pleasing feeling. Everything is beautiful. Everything is eternal. Everything is very pleasing to the heart. So that's why the Lord is transcendental. He is not made up of Asat, Achit, Nirananda. He is made up of Sat, Chit, Ananda. When we associate with Sat, Chit, bliss, happiness, we get pleased because we ourselves, the living entity itself, is Sat, Chit, Ananda. Godhead is the most beautiful person amongst all others. His transcendental beauty, one after another, in order to teach the impersonalist that the personality of Godhead is not an imagination by the devotee for facility of worship, but is the supreme person in fact and figure. The impersonal feature of the absolute truth is but his radiation, as the sun rays are but radiations from the sun. Here, Prabhupada is further explaining why Sukadeva Goswami is taking the time to explain in such detail the transcendental forms of the Lord, different aspects of the Lord. Because people in general think that the impersonalists think that impersonal form of the Lord is the ultimate truth. Impersonal Brahman means some homogeneous, non-variegated light. That is the ultimate thing. That's what the impersonalist says. Here, Sukadeva Goswami is emphasizing this personality, the description of the Lord, to clearly say that these are all not just imagination by devotees. These are all eternal transcendental form, and this is the summum bonum. This is the conclusion of understanding the absolute truth. And here further it is explained, right, that the impersonal absolute truth is nothing but radiation of his bodily effulgence. The Brahma Jyoti, right, is nothing but bodily effulgence of the Supreme Lord. In the spiritual sky, right, the spiritual sky is filled with Brahma Jyoti, effulgence. That is nothing but effulgence coming from his bodily complexion. From his body, the rays emanating from the Supreme Lord is called Brahman or Brahma Jyoti. Like the sunshine coming from the sun. If you look at it, right, the sun, if you look at all this in this world, all this living entity in this material world are sustained by sun in the form of sunshine. Sunshine is the source of all energy in this world. Because of sunshine, everything exists in this material world. But sunshine is everywhere, existing everywhere, homogeneous, all pervading. But sunshine is not the ultimate thing. Even though sun and sunshine always they are together, we all know that sun is the source of the sunshine. Similarly, Bhagavan and his bodily effulgence, they exist always. But Bhagavan is the source of this Brahma Jyoti or Brahman. His bodily effulgence is what? Called Brahman or Brahma Jyoti. So one should not think that this deity form, deity worship is meant for some neophytes, and generally people say that this deity worship and all these things for people who are not advanced. Once you get advanced, so you you worship impersonal avyakta form and all they say. But that is actually very clearly rejected by Sukadeva Goswami, and Prabhupada clearly tells in purport that the Bhagavan form is the superior to the impersonal form. And that is what's confirmed by Krishna also in Bhagavad Gita, 12th chapter. Krishna very clearly tells that I am actually like my worshipping my Bhagavan form, my personal form is actually superior. Whereas worshipping this impersonal form is very indirect and it's very cumbersome. And also in other places, Krishna very clearly tells, Brahmanoham Pradishtaham, right? I am the basis of the impersonal Brahman. So impersonal Brahman is nothing but bodily effulgence. We'll continue reading the 12th verse. The Lord's magnanimous pastimes and the glowing glancing of his smiling face are all indications of his extensive benedictions. One must therefore concentrate on this transcendental form of the Lord as long as the mind can be fixed on him by meditation. Purport. In Bhagavad Gita, 12th chapter, 5th verse, it is said that impersonalist undergoes a series of difficult programs on account of his impersonal meditation. But the devotee, due to the Lord's personal service, progresses very easily. Impersonal meditation is therefore source of suffering for the impersonalist. Here the devotee has an advantage over impersonalist philosopher. The impersonalist is doubtful about the personal feature of the Lord, and therefore he always tries to meditate upon something which is not objective. For this reason, there is an authentic statement in Bhagavatam regarding the positive concentration of the mind on the factual form of the Lord. The process of meditation recommended herein is Bhakti Yoga, or the process of devotional service after one is liberated from the material conditions. Jnana Yoga is the process of liberation from the material condition. After one is liberated from the conditions of material existence, when one is nivritta, as previously stated herein, or when is freed from all material necessities, one becomes qualified to discharge the process of Bhakti Yoga. Therefore, Bhakti Yoga includes Jnana Yoga, or in other words, the process of pure devotional service simultaneously serves the purpose of Jnana Yoga. Liberation from material conditions is automatically achieved by gradual development of pure devotional service. These effects of Bhakti Yoga are called Anartha Nivritti. Actually, Prabhupada is explaining here, when somebody executes the process of devotional service, automatically that person is liberated from the material sufferings. How a jnani, by analyzing all the things in this world, that this is temporary, this is temporary, this is temporary, he goes through this nivritti process of rejecting all these temporary things. Finally, to come to see that everything is temporary except himself. I am different from all this matter. With that knowledge, he gets liberated. That's how one gets liberated through the process of Jnana Yoga. Seeing that I am not this, I am not this, I am not this, he rejects all the material things, and I am separate from all these things. That's how a jnani gets liberated. So when in the Bhakti Yoga process, a devotee practices devotional service. Even when we follow the sadhana bhakti, we may not be in the pure prema platform yet. Even when we follow the devotional service in the regulation, practicing stage, one can actually get rid of all this material contamination. That process is called Anartha Nivritti, removing unwanted things from the heart. So this Anartha Nivritti process, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains in Madhurya Kadamani. So Rupa Goswami describes the process of bhakti in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu in one verse. Adavishadda sadhu sangha bhajana kriya anartha nivritti nishta ruchi ashakti bhava prema. These are the 9 stages in which one's devotional service develops. This one verse explains the science behind the process of bhakti yoga. Shraddha, initially some faith or having some positive appreciation towards devotional activities. Shraddha. Next comes sadhu sangha, association of the devotees. And then next comes bhajana kriya, getting initiated by a bona fide spiritual master and discharging, practicing sadhana bhakti under the guidance of under the instruction of a bona fide spiritual master. That is called bhajana kriya. When somebody executes bhajana kriya under the guidance of a spiritual master, he goes through the process of anartha nivritti, getting rid of the unwanted things. When the unwanted things in the heart gets cleansed, one comes to the stage of nishtha. Nishtha means steadiness. One will be regulated in discharge of the devotional service. Still, he is not attained the pure love of the Godhead, but he is regulated every day. He will be like attending Mangalarati. Every day he will be like chanting his 16 rounds in the morning. Every day attending, reading Bhagavatam. Every day doing everything in a proper way, regulated way. So this can be used as a yardstick to measure ourselves, where we stand in our devotional service. So one might have been getting one might have some faith, one might be getting some association, one might have got initiated. But most of us, right, 99% of the practicing devotees, we are all in the anartha nivritti stage. Until we get rid of the anartha nivritti, one cannot come to the nishtha. When we see that somebody is in the nishtha stage, that means he had gotten rid of most of the anarthas, at least the gross anarthas. There are two types of anarthas, the gross and subtle. The gross anarthas are based on bodily behavior. The time we eat, time we sleep, time we get up, right? These are all based on body. And then there is like subtle anarthas. Subtle anarthas like based on mind, our intelligence and false ego. So that getting rid of our false ego, anartha nivritti, that goes till up to the prema stage. Whereas gross anarthas, when somebody gets rid of it, one comes to the nishtha stage. Nishtha means steadiness. He will discharge his devotional service steadily. When somebody executes devotional service steadily, he will develop taste, ruchi. When somebody regularly recites Bhagavatam, regularly attends Mangalarati, regularly chants his 16 rounds in the morning, he will develop a taste for the process. So that is ruchi. When somebody develops ruchi for the devotional service, he will get attachment to the process. He will get attached. He doesn't want to give up. So that is called ashakti. When somebody executes devotional service in this with a taste and attachment consistently, he starts seeing the initial experience. When the Lord reciprocates for his devotional service in a particular single mode, it is called bhava. The one mood which Lord reciprocates, it's called bhava. When that fully develops, blossoms in variegatedness, in multiple different exchanges happens, that is prema. The prema happens in the spiritual world. So even when a devotee is in the bhava stage, one cannot, he is actually externally he will be still following sadhana bhakti. Internally he might be in a bhava stage. We cannot easily identify a devotee who is in bhava. Externally still he will be following the rules and regulations of the bhakti. We cannot really understand very easily who is in bhava stage. Until otherwise that person is himself situated in bhava, he cannot experience who is in bhava. You cannot see who is in bhava. So Srila Prabhupada, right? Actually some of his disciples, he said this particular devotee is in bhava. Because Prabhupada knows. Because he was already a pure devotee. He knows who is in bhava, who is not in bhava. We'll continue to read the purport. Shri Radha Neelamada Bhagavan ki jai. We will finish this purport and we will stop there. These effects of bhakti yoga are called anartha nivritti. That means getting rid of the unwanted things from the heart. Things which are artificially acquired gradually disappear along with the progress of bhakti yoga. Meditation on the lotus feet of the personality of Godhead, the first processional step, must show its effect by anartha nivritti. The grossest type of anartha which binds the conditioned soul in the material existence is sex desire. And this sex desire gradually develops in the union of male and female. When the male and female are united, the sex desire is further aggravated by the accumulation of buildings, children, friends, relatives and wealth. When all these are acquired, the conditioned soul becomes overwhelmed by such entanglements, and the false sense of egoism or the sense of myself and mine becomes prominent. And the sex desire expands to various political, social, altruistic, philanthropic and many other unwanted engagements, resembling the foam of the sea waves, which becomes very prominent at one time and at next moment vanishes as quickly as a cloud in the sky. The conditioned soul is encircled by such products as well as products of sex desire, and therefore bhakti yoga leads to gradual evaporation of the sex desire, which is summarized in 3 headings, namely profit, adoration and distinction. Here Prabhupada again further explains that actually sex desire means it is not just some gross form of sex desire. Even when somebody is in a brahmacharya platform, brahmacharya ashram, or even sannyashram ashram, or vanaprastha ashram, if he aspires to have profit, adoration and distinction, that means we need to understand that that person has sex desire. These are all, there are two types of sex desire. One is the subtle form, another is the gross form. Gross form is in connection with opposite sex. Whereas the subtle form of sex desire is nothing but one is looking for profit, adoration and distinction. So when a devotee executes devotional service in association of the devotees, it is very, very easy to get rid of the gross sex desire. Because of our social activities, because of the way we work, automatically we will regulate. If you are in an ashram, if you are like living as a brahmachari in an ashram, it's easily, there is no question of having material sex. That is not possible. Because in association, automatically we get rid of it. Whereas the subtle form of this desire, that is nothing but looking for profit, adoration and distinction. What does it mean, profit, adoration and distinction? Profit means when I did something nicely, some service, whatever the things comes out of the thing, I am trying to take advantage of it. I am given a position as a manager in the temple, or as a pujari, or as a treasurer, or as a president, or whatever position has been given based on my devotional service. Somebody says that, oh, you are qualified to do this. Then we try to take advantage of that situation. That's called profit. And adoration means looking for recognition. And then distinction means that the way I do it is different from all others. This profit, adoration and distinction are nothing but subtle form of sex desire. That's what Prabhupada is telling. All conditioned souls are mad after these different forms of sex desire, and one shall see for himself how much he has been freed from such material hankerings based primarily on the sex desire. As a person feels his hunger satisfied after eating each morsel of the foodstuff, he must similarly be able to see the degree to which he has been freed from sex desire. The sex desire is diminished along with its various forms by the process of Bhakti Yoga, because Bhakti Yoga automatically, by the grace of the Lord, effectively results in knowledge and renunciation, even if the devotee is not materially very well educated. Knowledge means knowing things as they are, and if by deliberation it is found that there are things which are all unnecessary, naturally the person who has acquired knowledge leaves aside such unwanted things. When conditioned souls finds by culture of knowledge that material necessities are unwanted things, he becomes detached from such unwanted things. This stage of knowledge is called vairagya, or detachment from unwanted things. We have previously discussed that transcendentalist is required to be self-sufficient and should not beg from rich blind persons to fulfill bare necessities of life. Shukodeva Goswami have suggested some alternatives for the bare necessities of life, namely the problem of eating, sleeping and shelter. But he has not suggested any alternative for sex satisfaction. One who has sex desire still with him should not at all try to accept the renounced order of life. For one who has not attained to the stage, there is no question of renounced order of life. So, by the gradual process of devotional service under the guidance of a proper spiritual master and following the desires of the Bhagavatam, under following the principles of the Bhagavatam, one must be able at least to control the gross sex desire before one accepts the renounced order of life factually. Here Prabhupada actually explains further who the renounced order of life is for. The sannyasa and vanaprastha order of life is meant for a person who had overcome the gross desire for sex life. That's what he's saying. So purification means getting free gradually from sex desire, and this is attained by meditation on the person of the Lord as described herein. Beginning from the feet, one should not try to go upwards artificially without seeing for himself how much he has been released from the sex desire. This smiling face of the Lord is the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. And there are many upstarts who at once try to begin with 10th canto, and especially with the 5 chapters which delineate the Rasalila of the Lord. This is certainly improper. By such improper study or hearing of Bhagavatam, the material opportunists have played havoc by indulging in sex life in the name of Bhagavatam. This vilification of the Bhagavatam is rendered by the acts of the so-called devotees. One should be free from all kinds of sex desire before he tries to make a show of recital of Srimad Bhagavatam. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakura clearly defines the import of purification as cessation from sex indulgence. He says, Yata yata dis cha sudyati vishaya lampayatam tyajati tata tata dharayet iti siddha suddhi taratyam yenaiva dhyana taratyayam uktam. And as one gets free from the intoxication of sex indulgence by purification of intelligence, one should step forward for the next meditation, or in which the words, the process of meditation on different limbs of the transcendental body of the Lord should be enhanced in proportion to the progress of the purification of the heart. The conclusion is that those who are still entrapped by sex indulgence should never progress to meditation above the feet of the Lord. Therefore, recital of Srimad Bhagavatam by them should be restricted to the first and second cantos of the great literature. One should complete the purificatory process by assimilating the contents of the first 9 cantos. Then one should admitted into the realm of 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. We will stop here. Prabhupada here very clearly tells 2 instructions he is giving here very clearly. When somebody takes darshan of the Lord, right, where do we start? We start from the lotus feet, right? A person who has still not gotten rid of the sex desire, that person should only focus on the lotus feet of the Lord. Similarly, Srimad Bhagavatam, right, is nothing but non-different than Krishna. Bhagavatam is non-different than Krishna. The first 2 cantos represents the lotus feet of the Lord. Similarly, a person who have not gotten over this propensity to enjoy sex life, he should not be giving Bhagavatam class beyond the 2nd canto. So clear, Prabhupada very clearly giving instruction here. Only though they should be giving, if somebody has still sex desire, one should not go beyond, one should not give classes on Bhagavatam beyond 2nd canto, 1st canto and 2nd canto, because 1st canto and 2nd canto is nothing but the lotus feet of the Lord. By focusing on the lotus feet of the Lord, what will happen? Anartha Nivarti will happen, and that person can overcome that particular propensity. So that is the prescription. That is the conclusion Prabhupada is giving from this purport. Hare Krishna, we will stop here. Thank you. Tomorrow, His Grace, our Vedanaran Prabhu will be speaking on Srimad Bhagavatam, continuing from verses